this one was rough. Yeah, this one was rough. Glad it's over. Hi, my name is Christy. Welcome back to my channel, where as a YouTube taught sewer, I take old stuff and turn it into new stuff and show you my struggles the entire way through. This one is ripe with them. Anyways, I took some fabric that my lovely mother-in-law gave me. Thank you so much, Debbie. And it is a blue knit with a lighter blue kind of striped threading through it. And she wasn't using it anymore and gave it to me. So that's my old thing. And I saw a cool dress that I really liked the back of on Shein. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Shein, but I saw it has a crisscross back, and I thought I can do that. I can do that totally. And I did. To be fair, I did it, but it was definitely over ambitious for my talent level. So, anyways, let's get to it. I'm so excited. Kind of. I'm so excited that this one is over. So, enjoy. Okay, so here's the fabric. I'm patterning from a dress that I already own and that I like the way it fits me. It also has a similar stretch as the blue fabric. So here I am just smoothing it out flat, making sure the corners are perfectly aligned and that the bottom lines up. And then here's where I should have realized that this was going to be a difficult project, because my very first shot, I already made a mistake by not closing the door. And if you can hear the dog paws coming in the background, I got dog bombed by my sweet little baby Roscoe. He just rolls all over my project. Can you hear him snorting? So cute. Okay, take two. So now I have my dress laid out flat and I'm preparing to cut around the dress, leaving a seam allowance. I'm going to use about 1/2 inch seam allowance, really just eyeballing it. Probably should have taken the time to measure. I didn't. Oh well. All right, taking my fabric chalk, and to mark the top of the skirt, I'm using my thumbnail to feel where to mark the waistband, since I can't see it. So I'm just using my thumb all along, marking every about 2 inches or so to find the waistband. And cut. Just cutting along. Like I said, I'm just eyeballing about 1/2 inch seam allowance. Didn't measure like I probably should have. And it is a long trip around the skirt. Okay, when I get to this point, I'm going to connect my marks with a smooth chalk line so that I can cut more easily. Easier? Easier. Okay, and here, just the same thing for the back of the skirt. Mark the top the same way so that I can cut all the way around at 1/2 inch seam allowance-ish. Now that I have my skirt pieces cut out, I take the back piece and fold it in half. And it actually worked out because there was one of the light blue threading lines perfectly in the middle, and I used that as a guide to cut a straight line down the center back so that I can put a zipper in later. And I end with a happy swan dive into the shot. Okay, time to piece this lady together. With right sides together, I am lining up the edges of the skirt front and the skirt back so that I can pin all along the edge. Then sew all the way down the side. Always want to backstitch at the beginning and the end, and don't sew over your pins. Now that I've sewed both back pieces to the skirt front, I tried it on my dress form just to see if it was going to work. And it is, I think. Next step is moving on to fitting the bodice, and I will do this on my dress form after my quick model sesh. and break my chalk. Okay, back on track. I am fitting the bodice to my dress form. By the way, the dress form, it's adjustable, so it's to my measurements. I've lost some weight, and I thought that might be a good idea because I'd still like to lose some more weight. That it would be a better idea to get an adjustable dress form so I can take it in, hopefully not out, but in. So I am pinning the darts here, one that goes up the front and then one that goes to the side. I always have problems fitting the bodice. This is just my Achilles heel here. I want the neckline to be a V-neck, and I need to mark also where the top will meet the skirt, allow for seam allowance. I think that's what I'm trying to do. I'm also trying to mark the sides. In hindsight, I can see here I am just doing the armholes all wrong, and you'll see later when it's cut out that the top just does not fit. So I transferred all of my chalk markings into lines, trued them up, and now I'm cutting out with seam allowance, and you can see the double line at the shoulders. That's the seam allowance that I did actually measure this time. I fit it back on my dress form just to make sure everything was lining up okay. And in the front, you can see it's just a happy accident that the lines are actually lining up. Cool. I used my fabric chalk so that I could mark where the darts are, and you can see I've pinned them along here so I know exactly where to sew. Once you get towards the skinny end of the dart, I like to shorten the stitch length for the last couple of centimeters. And then instead of back stitching at the end, I'll just tie the threads off twice. Same thing for the other darts. I will back stitch at the thicker end and not back stitch at the skinnier end, or my needle will become unthreaded. Okay, sewed all the darts finally, and this is what it looks like. I've redressed my dress form so I can try to figure out how to make the back straps, see how thick I want them or how thin I want them, and the crisscross shape. I'm just using random scraps of fabric here to try to figure out the best options. And here's what I came up with, or what I hope I come up with. I've carefully transferred the fabric scraps to the remaining fabric, pinned it together so I could cut, and I had to cut out, I wanted to make them pretty sturdy, so I cut out doubles of each one. So I needed really to cut out 8 pieces altogether. Here are my 8 pieces, 4 in total, but just double on each so that I can pin them together and make them a little sturdier. Trying to figure out the crisscross pattern. That's not it. That's closer. Nope. Come on. There you go. One more. There it is. This is my first time using iron-on interfacing, so that's what I'm doing here. I've cut out the interface pieces and I've put the protective pillowcase over top so it doesn't gum up the iron. My dog's rolling around in the background, upstaging my shot again. The iron I just hold over each spot about 4 to 5 seconds just to make sure that it adheres correctly, which it didn't right there. So just go over it again and you're good. With the interfacing now ironed on to all 4 pieces, I'm sewing up just 2 sides, the long sides of each one. So here the interfacing is on the bottom and I have the fabric right sides together so that when I invert each piece, the interfacing will be on the inside. Before turning it inside out, I want to trim off the excess so that it lays flatter and isn't so bulky. So not necessary, just fun. Here I'm making the facing for the neckline to give it a nice professional look. I outlined the neckline, it's hard to see there, it's in yellow. And then from that line, I marked 2 inches from it, which you'll see later that was definitely not enough. And mark just every couple inch or so. Use a ruler to make the line super straight, just makes it easier to cut, and then cut. So here's the facing that I cut out. You can already see it is just way too small. And I also totally forgot to iron on that iron-on interfacing that I bought. I was at least smart enough to draw a V there, since you'll have to pivot on the sewing machine to get that nice crisp V. But that's where being smart stopped. As you get closer to the V in the center, it's best to just use your markings as a guide. And when you get to that point, manually, that's what I'm doing here, is just kind of manually lifting and lowering the needle so that I can get exactly to that point that I had made. So I can lift the presser foot, pivot the fabric, and then continue up the other side and maintain the seam allowance the same. Right here, where I noticed that I messed up. Definitely messed up, way too small. So just trying to think out of the box, maybe I can make it into bias tape and do it that way. Nope, garbage idea. Better idea is just to start over, seam rip, and show my unmakeuped, disappointed face. Okay, so I did it all over again, this time with a much wider facing, and I remembered the iron-on interfacing this time. Put the same yellow V so I could pivot correctly, and this time it turned out much better. To eliminate a lot of the bulk, make a cut right to the V, almost to it, not through it. Definitely don't want to go through it, but make a cut as close as you can to the threading. And then just eliminate the bulk on both sides. You're gonna wanna try to trim it to like 1/4 of an inch. And do your notches. One last step to make sure that the facing stays on the inside is to iron all of those little tabs towards the facing and then do an understitch along there just to keep it in place. After sewn, this is what it looks like. You go real close to the edge, just like 1/4 inch from the edge, and make sure you're doing this on the facing side, not the outside, because you don't want these stitches to be visible from the outside. Next step is to sew both sides of the bodice, which is pretty easy. You just fold the fabric over twice and then sew. Okay, so before I attach the skirt to the bodice, you have to finish the edges so that they don't fray. I did a little experiment. Here I did the standard zigzag stitch, but on the other seam, I folded each edge under and straight stitched the fabric, and I think it looks a lot neater, but there's probably a reason why people just do the zigzag stitches. Maybe it's easier? Please let me know in the comments if there is an actual reason, because after ironing both sides, the hem side looks prettier. Finally attaching the bodice to the skirt, I am gonna try my hardest to line up those lines so that they're continuous. And as I flip it over, it is definitely not actually in the center, but you know what? We're gonna give it a go. Just add a ridiculous amount of pins and hope for the best. Guys, it actually worked. I lined up the lines. It is so not centered and probably gonna give me problems, but I will figure that out later. To finish off the sides where the back part is kind of backless, I've just folded it down just like a hem and just hemming the top. So fold it over twice and then sew along the edge, and I'm gonna leave like 1 inch on each side so I can put the zipper in. Now moving on to the armholes. Ugh, this armholes, seriously, bane of my existence. Anyways, I was so excited that the interfacing that I first used was actually the perfect size for the armholes. So I was excited and thought something was working out, and folded each over twice, cut it in half, folded each over twice to make a bias tape, and you just iron it so that it's like folded towards the center. It's hard to explain, but you'll see what I mean. So you attach this bias tape. It's kind of cool to make bias tape out of the fabric because then it perfectly matches. So you just line up the edge. This is on the outside, right side. This is the outside. And then you fold it so that it's towards the inside. So this is kind of the same as the neck facing. You pin along and sew, and then after you've sewed along there, you want to reduce the bulk by just clipping the edges close to the stitching line and then do the notches. And then same thing, you're just going to fold everything towards the inside. Use that iron edge to make it nice and crisp. You want to kind of fold it over a little bit so that more is on the inside. Pin all along and then sew. And this is what it turns out to look like, except I made another mistake. I didn't catch the bottom side in the stitching, so it just folds out. Oh, it just folds out. Seam ripped and started over again. This time it worked. I was careful to make sure I caught the underside. And now I'm moving on to figuring out the straps on the back. It is really helpful to have the dress form to try to fit and see exactly where I'm wanting the straps to line up. So that's what I'm doing here. And then you sew. Guys, I did this like 4 times. I just trying to get the fit right and make sure that the straps laid flat. It was a process. In hindsight, instead of doing one continuous stitch like I'm doing here, I would have done each strap individually so I could adjust them individually. Live and learn, right? Okay, moving on to putting the zipper in. Now that I have the straps mostly adjusted, that's one is still gaping on this side. Yikes. But it's easiest if you have someone to help you do this so you don't pin yourself. But if you do have to do it yourself, just kind of do your best to figure out where it naturally comes together, both at the top and then kind of where the bottom of the zipper would go. So it looks real awkward, but that's what I'm doing here. Guys, I am not the best at zippers, so I would look to somewhere else to find a better tutorial than what I'm doing here. But what I've done is I've transferred the marks that I made when I was wearing it so I can see where it's supposed to line up. And then you have to flip it and sew it. Like here, I've pinned it and kind of left the top so I can fold that down later. That's why I left that inch at the top when I was sewing up the sides. And then you use a zipper foot. Hopefully your sewing machine has one, and they never go on like everybody else's. I swear, I struggle so much with this. Like you just have to line it up, but it never goes. It's like, yeah, yep. Yeah, this is what actually happens. All the other tutorials you'll see on YouTube, that was like their 5th try trying to get it on, I swear. At least I hope, because it never works out for me. After finally getting the zipper foot on, you want to sew as close to the zipper teeth as possible. And it's just, I don't know, this is just not my strength. There are lots of other people with great tutorials on how to do this, but it zips, it worked. It's crooked, but it worked. And if that wasn't hard enough, this is actually probably even worse, is finishing the rest of the hem to make sure that it lines up. I know I'm not inspiring anyone to do a zipper, but it's just me. It's a me thing. But yeah, so you have to line it up. It's really hard because the tape gets in the way. The zipper tape, it just won't get out of the way. But you need to sew like right to the side of it so that there's not a hole. And oh, it's just hard for me. I probably just need more practice. So here it is, it zips, it's crooked like I said, but you know what, it's DIY, it's fine. Next step is to fold over the top that we left undone so that it looks finished. You fold over at the zipper tape and then just sew across. Whenever making anything, I totally recommend just trying it on as much as possible because you can really see how it's fitting or not fitting, because that's what I'm seeing here. I don't like the way it is fitting around my arms. The back looks pretty good so far. Zipper looks okay. But moving on, so we're going to try to fix the top. And again, the dress form is super helpful. If you have one or can get one, I totally recommend that. You can see how far off I was. I was way off. So to alter the armholes so that they fit better, I have to undo everything I just did. So sad. but necessary. So I created new bias tape. I've pinned that bias tape and I've notched that bias tape so that I can sew the new bias tape. Okay, that's finally on the last step. I swear, this dress, it just took much longer than it needed to. So all I'm doing is hemming the bottom of the skirt by folding it over twice and just sewing along the whole length of the skirt. It's done. Holy crap, that was painful, but it's done. It actually turned out nice, so I'm happy with it. Thank you so much for sticking it out with me. And if you're ready, here's the final dress. If you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. Make it a great day.